Ava's black dress was too simple for the Astoria room at the Pierre Hotel. She knew it. She had known it when she bought it, but it was the same one she had worn the night she met Ethan 5 years ago. A private irony for an evening that promised to be a public disaster. The maitre d', with a professional smile, led her between the tables. The murmurs, the clinking of crystal, the scent of truffle and expensive seafood. It all felt alien to her. At the end of the room, at the round table by the window, showcasing the glittering Manhattan skyline, was her family, or what was left of it. Ethan, with his perfect toothed smile, already a little glassy from the wine. To his right, Eleanor, his mother, her features as sharp as ever. Aunt Margaret, a few cousins, a couple of partners from the firm, a circle of malicious expectation. "So glad you could finally grace us with your presence, Ava," Eleanor said without standing. Her voice a blade sheathed in silk cut through the air. "We thought you'd gotten lost, or perhaps had something more important to do." Ava kissed the cold cheek Eleanor offered. "The traffic on Park Avenue was hellish. Happy birthday, Ethan." Her husband gave her a brief glance, almost annoyed by the interruption. He was already immersed in an anecdote about a golf deal. "Have a seat," he said, gesturing to the empty chair next to his Aunt Margaret, the one furthest from him. "We saved you a spot." Ava sat. Dinner proceeded amidst impeccably presented dishes and empty conversations. She ate little, observing, waiting, knowing the moment would come. Eleanor hadn't invited her to sit by her side to keep her away. It was a punishment, a reminder of her place. Dessert arrived, a chocolate soufflé that Ethan loved. The waiters cleared the plates. The conversation lulled for a moment. That's when Eleanor raised her voice, addressing no one and everyone. "And nothing special for the birthday boy?" she asked, her pale eyes fixed on Ava. "Although thinking about it with you, one never knows. Last Christmas was memorable. Remember Ethan? That garish silk tie." A muffled giggle rippled through the table. Ethan rolled his eyes. Complicit. "Please, Mother, don't remind me of that monstrosity." Ava took a deep breath. From her purse, she pulled out a simple, plain white envelope with no writing on it. It was thin, almost fragile. She placed it on the tablecloth in front of Ethan's plate. "Happy birthday," she said in a clear voice. An uncomfortable silence. Everyone looked at the envelope. There was no jewelry box, no keys to an expensive car, just a cheap envelope. Ethan looked at it as if it were a cockroach. A mocking smile played on his lips. "Seriously? This is it? After showing up late and dressed for a funeral, you bring me paper?" He picked up the envelope between his thumb and forefinger with disdain. "Let me guess. A voucher for a romantic dinner? Oh God, forbid a poem." And let out a short, dry laugh. "Don't be harsh, son. In her own way, Ava always tries, even if the results are, well, limited. It's difficult when you don't have the talent or class for the important things, to support a man, a family, to do more than be a failed decoration." The word hung in the air. Failed. Failed. Ava didn't look away from Ethan. He was holding the envelope, toying with it. "My mother has a point, you know," Ethan said, and his tone was no longer one of complicity, but of pure cruelty. "Look around you, Ava. What have you accomplished? You quit your job. You can't give me children. You don't know how to run a house. You can't even pick out a decent gift for your own husband. You're an unfinished project, an empty promise." Ava felt the heat of their gazes, the second-hand embarrassment, the morbid curiosity. But she didn't lower her head. "Open the envelope, Ethan," she said, calm. "What for?" "To see your good intentions written down." The sneer on his face deepened. Then, with a sudden gesture, he didn't toss the envelope onto the table. He threw it directly at Ava's face. The paper edge grazed her cheek and fell onto her empty plate, getting stained with a dark sauce. A collective gasp. Not even Eleanor had expected that move. Ethan's sister Lauren put a hand over her mouth. Ethan leaned back in his chair, defiant, a glass of cognac in hand. "There's your gift. I hope you're satisfied." Everything stopped. The silence was absolute. The waiters, motionless by the kitchen door, stared straight ahead, pretending not to hear. Ava looked at the soiled envelope on her plate. Then she slowly raised her eyes and looked at her husband. And then she smiled. It wasn't a forced smile, not a sad or crazed one. It was a genuine, calm, almost pitying smile. A smile that didn't fit the humiliation, the fury, the tears everyone expected. Ethan blinked, disconcerted. "What are you laughing at?" He snapped, his voice losing some of its confidence. Ava stood up, picked up her purse with unhurried movements, took the stained envelope from the plate, wiped it with a napkin and put it in her bag. Then she walked over to Ethan, leaned in as if to give him the customary farewell kiss on the cheek, but stopped an inch from his ear. Her voice was a whisper so low only he could hear it, laden with a terrifying calm. "You're going to regret that more than you can possibly imagine." She straightened up. She saw the confusion, the first flicker of doubt in Ethan's eyes. She nodded at the table in general, a polite, icy smile on her lips. "Good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening." She didn't wait for a response. She turned and walked between the tables, feeling their eyes on her back. She walked with her head held high, the same black dress, now feeling like a suit of armor. As she passed the service door to the kitchens, a tall, broad figure in a white chef's coat slightly blocked her path. It was Paul, the chef owner. He'd been a classmate of her mother's in college 1,000 years ago. His intelligent old eyes looked at her with immediate understanding, without a trace of pity. Without a word, he slipped something into Ava's hand, a folded piece of a kitchen paper towel. Ava clenched it in her fist and kept walking, not looking back until she was out in the cold New York night air. The drive back to the house in Greenwich was a blur. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She just drove with her hands steady on the wheel, the smile gone from her face, replaced by a granite-like determination. The public humiliation, the word failed. The envelope hitting her face, it all burned like a fire inside her, but it was a cold, controlled fire. She would use it as fuel. The mansion was dark, silent, empty. It had never been a home. It was another of her concessions, another of her failures not being able to fill these impersonal walls with life. She turned on the light in the study, the room Ethan rarely used. She closed the door. Only then, with fingers that now trembled slightly, did she open her fist. The crumpled, greasy paper towel, an address written by hand. 8 Carmine Street basement. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Paul. What did he want? This wasn't the time to wonder. She left the paper on the desk and walked over to the portrait of her father, David, hanging on the wall. A man with a calm smile and dreamer's eyes, who had died too young, leaving his family in ruins and a heap of unanswered questions. Ava ran her fingers over the frame, then knelt. At the bottom of the built-in bookshelf, a piece of oak molding looked fixed. She pressed a specific spot with just the right amount of force. A soft click. A small secret compartment her father's idea swung open. Inside weren't the jewels Eleanor suspected she was hiding, just a small, book-sized digital safe. She entered the code, the date of her father's death. The door opened. Inside were several neatly arranged folders, and on top of them all, an envelope identical to the one she'd brought to dinner. White, simple, unmarked. The original. The one he had thrown in her face, the one now stained with sauce in her purse, was a copy. An empty copy. A bait. Ava took out the real envelope. She didn't open it. She didn't need to. She knew what it contained. Photocopies, bank statements, blurry photos taken in a hurry, a name, a date, a figure. The rotten foundations of the Montgomery Empire. The foundation that she, the failed one, the decoration had spent 2 years unearthing brick by brick in silence. She held it against her chest. The calm fury washed over her again. You're going to regret that. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And the long, silent night in the empty house was just the beginning. The morning came with a cold sun streaming through the living room windows. Empty. Ava hadn't slept. She sat on the same sofa where 5 years ago Ethan had proposed. She remembered his smile full of promises. Let me take care of you, Ava. Forget the sorrows, the problems. I'll give you the world. And she, an orphan in debt, with her small design studio on the verge of closing, had seen a life raft. How naive. The buzz of the intercom pulled her from her thoughts. It was Sophia. There was no need to ask who it was. Only 2 people had the code to the outer gate. Her lawyer and her sister, and Eleanor was in London. Sophia breezed in like a whirlwind, with her worn leather briefcase and her air of having no time to waste. She was short, with short greying hair, and her brown eyes missed nothing. You said it was urgent, and from your voice it wasn't a sign the divorce papers kind of urgent, she said without preamble, dropping the briefcase on the coffee table. What happened? Yesterday was the dinner. No, don't tell me. It was worse. Ava interrupted, her voice hoarse. Public humiliation at the Astoria room. Eleanor called me a failure in front of everyone. Ethan threw my gift in my face. Literally. Sophia let out a low whistle. Slowly, she sat down across from her. The envelope he threw was the empty copy. The original is there, Ava said, pointing to the open safe in the study. I came straight here, went over everything again. It's complete. Well, at least there's that. But it was a risky move, Ava. If he had opened it right there. He wouldn't. He despises everything that comes from me. To him it was a worthless piece of paper, just another dismissive gesture. And that very thing will be his undoing. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. Then she pulled a dossier from her briefcase. It matches what I've found. The Montgomerys are on the brink. The Florida real estate investments are a disaster full of irregularities. The bank has been putting on pressure for months. And here's the interesting part. She paused dramatically. A good portion of the company's liquid assets, what's left of them, have been transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands over the last 6 months, in the name of a shell corporation. Ava looked at her intently. Ethan is emptying the company. It seems so, and in a hurry. Your evidence, Sophia gestured toward the study, indicates that the source of that money isn't entirely clean. Bribes to zoning officials, fake invoices. If the bank or the IRS finds out, it's not just the company that goes under. It's jail time. A heavy silence filled the room. Ava looked at her own hands. She didn't feel triumphant, just a huge emptiness and a dull rage. And Eleanor, she finally asked. Eleanor knows she must know, but she's blind. She thinks the Montgomery name will save her from everything as always. Hers is a different war, the war of appearances. That's why she attacked you yesterday. You're the loose cannon, the one she can't control, the one who can tear down the facade. A failed decoration. Eleanor's words echoed again. Ava closed her eyes. It wasn't the first time. 3 years ago, she had won a small competition to redesign a public plaza in Tribeca, a modest project, but her own. She came home euphoric with a bottle of champagne. Ethan was waiting in the living room looking grim. Ava, what is this? He asked, pointing to the email from the competition organizers open on his tablet. It's a project, Ethan. I won it. It's small, but without consulting me. His voice was glacial. What will people think that my wife needs to work, that I can't support her? It will look like we're broke. But it's not about that. It's about it being mine. It's yours. Eleanor had appeared at the door as if summoned. She always had that knack. Your place is here, Ava, taking care of this house, preparing to provide an heir, not playing with models like a child. Look around you. This is yours. Or is it not enough for you? Are you that ungrateful? The pressure was constant, subtle at first, then blatant. Leave that job, it's not proper. You don't have time for your duties. What will my friends say? Until one day Ethan gave her the ultimatum, the studio or the marriage. The Tribeca Plaza was never redesigned, at least not with her design. Ava. Sophia's voice brought her back to the present. Are you sure you want to do this? It's a hornet's nest. If you unleash this, there's no going back. It will be a dirty, dirty war. Ava opened her eyes and looked at her lawyer. I started digging 2 years ago, when I discovered the first strange transfers on his computer. It was by chance. I was looking for a tax file. He underestimated me so much he didn't even log out. And I kept going because of my father, Sophia. My father's company went bankrupt under suspicious circumstances. He always said they'd been ruined and the Montgomerys were among his main competitors. This is no longer just my broken marriage. It's something bigger and much more rotten. Sophia nodded slowly. All right then, we play. First step is to secure this. All digital copies in the cloud on an external hard drive that I will keep. And I need names Ava. Where did you get this photo? She pointed to a blurry image in one of the documents showing Ethan with a man in a parking garage exchanging a briefcase. Ava hesitated. It's a source. Someone who also has reasons not to wish the Montgomerys well. I can't tell you more yet. It's for their protection and mine. Trustworthy. So far, yes. They gave me this and a warning that I have to be careful that Eleanor won't just stand by. As if mentioning her name had summoned her the landline in the house, that antiquated device only Eleanor used to call, began to ring. A shrill ring that cut through the tense air of the room. Ava and Sophia looked at each other. Nobody used that number. Nobody except her. Ava stood up and answered with a steady hand. Yes, I knew you'd be there, scurrying back to your hole like a rat after last night's performance. Eleanor's voice was soft, venomous, like the brush of a snake. You've managed to get all of New York talking. Congratulations. For one day, you're interesting. What do you want, Eleanor? I want you to remember your place. You are nobody, Ava. Nobody without this name, without this family. Everything you have, we gave you. And we can take it away with a single phone call. Do you understand? Ava took a deep breath. She looked at the original envelope on the table next to Sophia's dossier. I think you're mistaken, Eleanor. I have nothing left to lose. The question is, Jim, do you... A silence on the other end of the line, then a click of the tongue. Ungrateful, just like your father. Useless dreamers, both of you. Look how he ended up. Do you want the same path? Ava's heart skipped a beat. The hand holding the receiver trembled. What do you mean by that? But Eleanor had already hung up. The dial tone filled Ava's ear. Was that? Sophia asked, standing beside her. Ava nodded slowly, hanging up the phone. The threat was clear, but it was the mention of her father that chilled her blood. Like your father. What did Eleanor know? What had she meant by that path? We have to hurry, Ava said, her voice now urgent. Today. Take everything. I have to go somewhere. She remembered the crumpled paper towel in her coat pocket. 8 Carmine Street basement. Tomorrow, 11 a.m. Paul the chef, her mother's friend. What did he want after all these years? And why now? Where are you going? Sophia asked as she began to methodically pack the documents into her briefcase. To see an old friend. Or at least, I hope he is. As she left the house, the sky had clouded over. A light rain began to fall on the city. Ava got into her car, a small compact that was solely hers, another of her small rebellions against the family's BMWs and Mercedes. Before starting the engine, she took out the paper towel and flattened it on the steering wheel. Carmine Street, in the West Village, near where her plaza would have been. It didn't seem like a coincidence. She started the engine. In the rearview mirror, the grand Greenwich mansion shrank grey and cold under the drizzle. The hornet's nest, Sophia had said. But she was no longer the hornet. She had bitten the cheese and found the mechanism. Now all that was left was to spring it. However, as she merged into traffic, a feeling of being watched crept over her. A nondescript grey sedan seemed to have pulled out of a side street right behind her. It could be paranoia. After Eleanor's call, anything was possible. But as she turned the corner onto the highway, the grey car turned right behind her. She knew it wasn't. The chase had begun. The grey car didn't disappear. Ava took a sharp turn onto a busy city street, ducked into a subterranean parking garage, drove around in circles, and exited through a different ramp. Her father's old trick worked. The grey car was lost in traffic. Her heart was pounding, but her hands on the wheel were firm. Eleanor's threat was no longer just verbal. She had eyes on the street. Carmine Street was a narrow, quiet lane in the West Village, away from the hustle. Number 8 was an old brownstone with a small storefront on the ground floor. There was no sign, just a solid wooden door and a steamed-up window. The basement. Ava took a deep breath and knocked. Paul the chef opened it. He was no longer in his immaculate white jacket, but wore a black turtleneck and simple pants. He looked older, more mundane, but his eyes were the same intelligent, observant, tired. "Get in quickly," he said, looking over her shoulder before closing the door. Inside wasn't a restaurant. It was a back room, a cluttered sanctuary. It smelled of old paper olive oil and herbs. Shelves were filled with old cookbooks, empty wine crates and hanging copper pots. In the center, a scarred wooden table with 2 chairs. "Were you followed?" Paul asked, offering her a chair. "I think I lost them," Ava said, sitting down. "What is this place, Paul?" "My office, my refuge. The kind of place no one from your social circle would ever set foot in." He pulled out an unlabeled bottle of red wine and 2 glasses. "From my family's vineyard in California. My brother makes it. It's not expensive, but it's honest. The way wine should be. The way people should be." He poured 2 fingers worth. Ava accepted it. The taste was rough, earthy, real. "Why did you help me last night?" she asked directly. Paul took a sip, watching her over the rim of the glass. "For your mother. For Isabel. She was my friend Ava, my best friend. Back when I was a star-struck young cook, and she was an art history student with more dreams than money, she'd always come to my first restaurant, a dive on the Lower East Side. She'd sit at the bar, make me laugh, talk to me about beauty while I was burning potatoes." A nostalgic smile escaped him. She was a sunbeam that went out too soon. Ava felt a lump in her throat. She rarely spoke of her mother. Cancer had taken her too quickly, too soon, leaving a hole that never closed. And why now? After all these years, Because last night I saw you, standing there in that black dress, smiling while they spat in your face. And I saw Isabel. I saw her same smile, the one she put on when things got really ugly. It was her armor. Paul put down his glass. And because she asked me to. Ava froze. What? Paul got up, went to a shelf full of dusty books, and from behind an encyclopedia of gastronomy, he pulled out a small, simple wooden box with a faded lid. He placed it on the table in front of Ava. She gave it to me a month before she died, Paul said. Keep this for me, she said. If my daughter ever needs a refuge, if you ever see her lost or in danger, give her this and tell her the truth. Ava stared at the box as if it were a snake. The truth. What truth? Open it, Paul said softly. With trembling fingers, Ava lifted the lid. There were no jewels or money, just papers, letters, old photographs, and on top, a black and white photo. A photo of her father, David, young and smiling with his arm around the shoulders of a woman who was not her mother. The woman was young, beautiful, with dark hair and an arrogant, familiar smile. Too familiar. That's Eleanor, Ava whispered, her heart now racing. That's a young Eleanor. Yes. Paul nodded heavily. Your father and Eleanor Montgomery were engaged over 30 years ago. It was a scandal at the time, brief but intense. The families arranged it. He, the talented but broke architect's son. She, the heiress to the Montgomery fortune. The perfect fairy tale. Ava stared at the photo, unable to look away. Her father, so young, so carefree, with his arm around the woman who was now her tormentor. What happened? Your father met your mother, Isabel, at an art exhibition, and everything fell apart. He broke off the engagement with Eleanor a month before the wedding. He humiliated her publicly. The Montgomerys never forgave him. And your father, well, he married Isabel. They had a wonderful daughter, but his career never took off as it should have. Commissions vanished. Clients turned their backs on him until 10 years later his studio went bankrupt. He always said they'd been ruined. He had suspicions, but could never prove anything. Ava remembered her father's late nights, working the frustration in his eyes, the sadness that sometimes enveloped him. The world isn't made for dreamers, sweetie, he used to tell her. Now she understood. You think it was them, the Montgomerys? Paul shrugged. I have no proof. I only know that Eleanor Montgomery never forgets a slight, and your father dealt her the biggest one possible. He rejected her for another woman, one with no money, no name. For Isabel. He paused. And now her son chose you, brought you into her house, and you haven't been the submissive wife she expected. You're Isabel's daughter. You're the living reminder of her humiliation. That's why she hates you, Ava. Not for who you are, but for what you represent. The pieces were falling into place with a dry, painful click. It wasn't just class snobbery, it was resentment. A 30-year deferred revenge. She was the instrument. And this, she asked, pointing to the other letters in the box. Letters from your father to your mother. Personal things, and this. Paul reached under the letters and pulled out a large, sealed envelope. Your mother told me this was the most important thing. She told me not to open it, that it was for you only if the time came. Ava took the envelope. On the outside, her mother's elegant, confident handwriting. For my Ava, when the world grows dark. She opened it. Inside were several things, a folded, ancient, yellowed architectural blueprint, and a letter in her mother's handwriting. My dearest Ava, if you're reading this, it means things have gotten difficult, and that Paul, good friend that he is, has decided the time has come. Forgive me for not telling you sooner. Your father and I wanted to protect you from this old resentment. But resentment has a long memory. The blueprint with this letter is your father's first major project. An apartment building in Chelsea with a much-praised interior courtyard. He won an award for it, shortly after the construction company went bankrupt. The project was never built. Or so we thought. A few years ago, after your father's death, an old colleague of his, Anthony Martin, contacted me. He said he had seen our building erected in Miami under a different architect's name with a different developer, in a very similar style, but not quite the same, as if they had stolen the idea, the soul, and dressed it in cheap clothes. The developer was a subsidiary of a company called Gold Coast Investments, Inc. I followed the trail. The ultimate owner, after several layers, is Montgomery Holdings. Your father didn't imagine it. They did it to him. Be strong, my love. Be the woman I know you are. And please be careful with Eleanor. Do not underestimate her thirst for vengeance. It runs deeper and is older than you are. Love you always, Mum. Ava couldn't hold back the tears. They rolled down her cheeks, silently falling on the old paper. They weren't tears of sadness, but of rage, a pure crystalline rage. They had robbed her father, robbed him of his dream, his legacy, and now they were trying to rob her of her dignity, her life. They... Her voice came out hoarse, broken. They ruined him. They killed him. Not directly, Paul said cautiously. But they took away his light. They stole his joy. And in the end, that kills too. Ava wiped the tears with the back of her hand. She took a deep breath. The sadness was transforming before her eyes into a steely determination. I need to see this man, Anthony Martin. Do you have his contact information? Paul nodded. Your mother wrote it on the back of the letter. He's an old man now, retired. But if you tell him you're the daughter of David and Isabel, he'll see you. He paused. Ava, this stuff you have about your husband, the company. Be very careful. Eleanor won't stop. You saw it last night. And the car that was following you was no coincidence. No beat. At that moment, Ava's phone vibrated in her pocket. It was an unknown number, but with a London area code. Her sister, Eleanor. I have to take this, she said, standing up. Paul nodded, collecting the glasses. Ava went to the window, her back to the room. Eleanor. Ava. Are you okay? Her sister's voice, usually so calm, sounded strained, echoing as if she were on the street. I just spoke with Sophia. She told me about last night. God, Ava, I'm so sorry. I'm fine. Better than you think. What about you? Why are you calling from an unknown number? An uncomfortable silence. Because someone has been asking about me here. About us. A guy with an American accent asking my neighbours, my doorman, saying he was an old family friend. But he's not Ava. I've never seen him. And he showed a picture of us when we were kids. A chill ran down Ava's spine. What did he want? I don't know. He was just asking if I was in contact with you, if I knew where you were. He said it was about an inheritance matter. It sounded like a lie. Ava, what's going on? Sophia said things. Things about Ethan's company, that you're in trouble. Listen to me, Eleanor. Ava lowered her voice. Don't talk to anyone. Don't give information to anyone. Change hotels if you have to. This is bigger than I thought, and it's older. It has to do with Dad. With Dad? What do you mean? I can't explain now, but promise me you'll be careful and that you trust me. I always trust you, Elena said, her voice trembling a little. But I'm scared. Me too. But fear is useless now. I'll call you soon. Be safe. She hung up. She leaned against the cold surface of the window. Outside, on the deserted street, A man in a dark jacket was walking slowly, looking at the door numbers. He stopped in front of number 8. He looked up at the window. Ava stepped back into the shadows. The man pulled out a phone, spoke briefly, and kept walking. "Paul," Ava said without turning, "do you have a back exit?" The chef nodded grimly. "Yes, through the cellar. It leads to a parallel alley." He came over, placing a heavy, warm hand on her shoulder. "Take the box. Take everything. And remember, Ava, you are not alone. Your mother sent you an ally, and I have no intention of failing her or you." Ava collected the papers, the photo, the letter, the blueprint, and put them in her purse along with her mother's envelope. The wooden box remained empty on the table, a shell of secrets now revealed. She followed Paul through a door, hidden behind a curtain, down a narrow stone staircase, to a small cellar full of bottles. At the far end, another low iron door. "This leads to Fountain Street. Go left and you'll be at Washington Square. Lose yourself in the crowd. Thank you, Paul, for everything. Thank you for being your mother's daughter. Now go and fight Ava. For all three of you." Ava pushed the heavy iron door. The grey, cold daylight momentarily blinded her. Before leaving, she turned back one last time. "Paul, do you think my mother would be proud?" The chef looked at her, and for the first time, Ava saw something wet glisten in the tough man's eyes. "She'd be so proud she wouldn't be able to stand it, kid. Now go." Ava stepped into the alley. The door closed behind her with a dull thud. She breathed in the cold air. In her purse, the past and present weighed like lead, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel lost. She felt focused. She had a clear enemy and a clear purpose. She walked quickly toward the square, blending into the crowd. The man in the dark jacket was gone, but she knew it wouldn't be the last time. The battle had begun, and she, the daughter of Isabel, and David, the failed one, the decoration was going to win it or die trying. Anthony Martin lived in a low-slung house with a small garden at the end of a quiet street on the outskirts of the city. The air smelled of damp earth and pruned roses. Ava rang the bell, feeling the weight of the folder under her arm. Inside, the sound of slow steps. The door opened. The man who appeared was tall, stooped with age, with fine white hair and thick plastic-rimmed glasses. His faded blue eyes scanned her from top to bottom, lingering on her face. They lit up. "Isabel," he murmured, and instantly corrected himself. "No, you're not her. You're Ava, the younger one. You have her eyes, the same look." "Mr. Martin, I'm Ava. Ava Solar. Paul told me—" "I know why you've come," he interrupted, his voice hoarse but firm. Come in, come in. It's not good for us to be seen at the door." He ushered her into a living room crowded with antique furniture, books, and above all, blueprints. Rolled-up blueprints. Blueprints spread on tables, blueprints hanging on the walls. The studio of an architect who never stopped being one. "Sit down. Coffee, or would you prefer something stronger?" he asked, settling into a worn leather armchair. "Coffee is fine, thank you." While Anthony moved clumsily toward a small kitchen, Ava observed the blueprints. She recognized the style, the elegance of the lines, the spaciousness. They were her father's. "He was the best," Anthony said, as if reading her mind, returning with 2 steaming mugs. "Your father, a visionary with a sense of space, of light, that very few have, or had." He let out a sigh. "But this country, you know, has always been hard on visionaries. It prefers the copycats, the ones who know who to thank." Ava took the mug, seeking warmth for her hands. "You wrote to my mother about a building in Miami." Anthony nodded slowly. He took off his glasses, wiping them on the hem of his sweater. "Yes, the Mirador building in South Beach. A beautiful project. A residential block with a communal interior courtyard full of light with ocean views from every balcony. He submitted it to a competition and won. It was his big break. He took a sip of coffee. But then everything went wrong. The developer who had the rights, East Coast Constructions, went bankrupt overnight. Debts, licensing problems. Your father was left without a project and with debts. That was the beginning of the end. And then the building was built. Anthony looked at her intently. Yes, 5 years later, on the same plot. Smaller, uglier, but with the central idea stolen. That interior courtyard, that layout, the essence. It was signed by another architect, a certain Wallace, a guy with no talent but a lot of connections. And the developer was another one, Gold Coast Investments, which is a subsidiary of Montgomery Holdings. Ava concluded, her throat dry. Exactly. Anthony leaned forward, his eyes shining with an old anger. I investigated it, Ava, in secret for your father because when he died, I knew something didn't add up. I found the thread and pulled. Gold Coast was a front. The money, the orders came from the top of the holding company. And at the head of the holding company at that time was your husband's mother, Eleanor Montgomery. The name echoed in the silent room. Ava knew it. She had read it in the documents, but hearing it from this man with such certainty made her stomach turn. Why? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Why would they do that? To steal an idea? My father wasn't that well known. He wasn't a threat. Oh, but he was. Anthony tapped the table with his finger, making the cups rattle. He was a talent, Ava, a true talent. And he had dared to reject her, to humiliate her. Eleanor Montgomery does not forget and does not forgive. Ruining him professionally was just the first step. Stealing his idea, building it without him showing him that she could take what he created and turn it into something vulgar and hers. That was the icing on the cake, the perfect revenge. And when he died heartbroken and broke, she must have toasted with champagne. Ava closed her eyes. She saw her father in his last months, pacing the empty studio, touching the dusty models with a sadness so deep it seemed to have absorbed him. Now she understood. It wasn't just failure. It was theft. The injustice. Do you have proof? She asked, opening her eyes. Anything. Anything that can prove the connection, something more than suspicion. Anthony hesitated. Then with a grunt he stood and went to an old metal file cabinet locked with a padlock. He opened it with a key he wore around his neck. He pulled out a thick manila folder full of papers. I didn't have this when I spoke to your mother. I got it later from a sensitive source. A former accountant at Montgomery Holdings, with remorse, or maybe just a desire for his own revenge. He placed the folder in front of her. There are transfers from Gold Coast to a Swiss account. From that account, payments to a certain Wallace, the architect who signed the project. And more interestingly, payments to a judge, to a zoning official, to accelerate the bankruptcy of East Coast Constructions and fast-track the permits for the new project. It's all here. This is the smoking gun, Ava. Ava opened the folder with trembling hands. There were photocopied documents, handwritten notes, bank statements, with underlined numbers, names. And in the middle of it all, a report from a private detective agency hired by Anthony years ago with photos. One of them showed Eleanor younger but unmistakable leaving an office building with a man in a suit. At the bottom of the photo, handwritten E.M., meeting with A.W. architect Wallace. This is incredible, Ava murmured. It's dangerous, Anthony corrected. If these people find out you have this, your husband, or that harpy of a mother of his, they already know, Ava said flatly. Or at least they suspect I know something. Last night at a restaurant, they publicly humiliated me. They're trying to scare me. and today I was followed. Anthony paled. Then you have to leave. You have to go to the police, to a judge. No, I need more. I need to understand everything. Ava looked up, meeting his eyes. You mentioned a studio. My father's studio. After it went bankrupt, did he keep anything blueprints projects, something they couldn't steal? Anthony reflected for a moment, rubbing his chin. Yes, your mother. When everything fell apart, she rented a small space, a storage unit in an old building near the train yards in Queens to store your father's things. She didn't want them in the house. Too many memories. I helped her move everything. Books, models, blueprints. Then when she got sick, she gave me the key. In case Ava ever asks, she said. He paused. I haven't been back since. It must be full of dust. But everything should still be there. It should be. Give me the address. And the key. Anthony rummaged in a drawer and handed her an old-fashioned key with large teeth tied with a string to a plastic tag with an address written on it. Forgetting Street number 12, Unit B. Be careful, Ava. If they're following you, that place is the last place they'd look. They don't know it exists. Thank you, Anthony, for everything, for being a friend to my father and my mother. It was the least I could do. The old man walked her to the door, placing a bony hand on her arm. Make them pay, child. For David, for Isabel, and for yourself. Forgetting Street was a narrow, grim alley near the Queen's train yards. Number 12 was a decaying brick building with peeling paint. Unit B had a rusty green metal door. Ava looked around. The street was deserted. She inserted the key into the lock. It screeched but turned. The smell of dust, dampness, and old paper hit her as she opened the door. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling. Ava flicked the switch. The yellowish light revealed a small, cluttered space. Boxes stacked to the ceiling. Architectural models covered in sheets like ghosts. Rolls of blueprints leaned against the walls. Her heart pounded. It was like entering the tomb of her father's dreams. She took a deep breath and started searching. She didn't know what she was looking for. She just trusted she would recognize it. She went through boxes filled with architecture books, old magazines, rusted drafting tools. Then in a corner, she found a large wooden trunk, locked with a rusty padlock, but no key. She looked around and saw a pile of tools. With an old hammer and a chisel, after several attempts, she managed to break the lock. Inside the trunk, protected by a burlap cloth, were rolls of blueprints, the largest, most carefully kept ones. She unrolled them reverently on the dusty floor, using boxes to hold down the corners. They were her father's projects. Sketches, ideas, designs. A house in the mountains, a museum, a skyscraper with fluid lines. And then she found it. The blueprint for the Mirador building. Her father's signature, David Solar, in the corner with the date 1987. It was beautiful, full of light, air, and life, just as Anthony had said. But then, under that blueprint, she found another. A smaller one. A pencil drawing, childish, clumsy. A building with many windows, a big sun in the corner, and a signature in large, shaky letters. AVA, age 5. It was her drawing. One of the many she made as a little girl, sitting at her father's feet in his studio, imitating him. He had kept it. He had kept it with his most important blueprints. Tears blurred her vision. She caressed it with a finger, wiping away the dust. And then, as she moved the blueprint, something slipped out from inside the roll. A thin envelope and a small leather-bound notebook with worn corners. Ava picked it up. It was her father's diary. She opened it to a random page. The firm, quick handwriting was familiar. May 3rd, 1998. Isabel is weaker. The doctors offer no hope. I just want the pain to go away. But there is something I must do first. I must protect my daughters. Eleanor Montgomery has reappeared. She's offering to help with my debts. I know what she wants. She wants the file. All the documentation on the Miami project. She thinks I have proof. And I do. Not in the studio. In the place only Isabel and I know. If something happens to me, my love, I hope you find this and give it to someone who can do something with it to justice to Ava. When she's older, to someone who can stand up to them. Forgive me for not being stronger. Forgive me for everything. Ava's heart stopped. The file. Proof. She looked at the envelope that had fallen out with the diary. It was sealed. On the outside, her father's handwriting, for Isabel or whomever she chooses. With trembling hands, she opened it. It contained a few sheets. Photocopies of financial documents and a list of names and account numbers. And a shorter letter. Dearest Isabel, or whoever reads this, if this has reached your hands, I am likely gone. I'm sorry. The people you see in these documents are responsible for my ruin. Eleanor Montgomery is the head, but she doesn't act alone. There's a lawyer, an Elliot Vance, who handles her dirty affairs, and an official Raymond Sterling in the zoning department. They orchestrated everything. The Mirador competition was rigged. I won, but they had already awarded the project to their puppet Wallace. It was all a farce to steal my idea and ruin me. The proof is here. The payments, the transfers, the emails. Yes. I kept copies of everything. Use them wisely and above all protect our daughters. Never let them get near that family. They are vipers. With all my love forever, David. Ava collapsed onto a box, breathless. She had it. She had everything. Not just suspicions, not just hints, but proof. Proof of the conspiracy to ruin her father. Proof that directly linked Eleanor. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible. The creak of a floorboard in the hallway outside the door. Ava froze, holding her breath. She hadn't made a sound. She was sure of it. The street was empty. She must have imagined it. Another sound. A soft scrape like a foot dragging just on the other side of the metal door. Someone was there. She looked around, desperately. There was no back exit, only the door she'd come through, and the light bulb that illuminated her as if on a stage. With swift, silent movements, she rolled up the blueprints, the diary and the documents and shoved them inside her coat, buttoning it up. She turned off the light, plunging the room into near total darkness, broken only by the thin line of light under the door. She crouched behind a stack of boxes near the door and picked up the hammer she had used earlier. It was heavy in her hand. Outside, she heard the metallic sound of something tampering with the lock. A faint click, then a slow creak, as if someone were trying to open the rusty door without making noise. Ava gripped the hammer handle, her knuckles white. Her mind was racing. Was it Ethan? Someone sent by Eleanor? The man in the grey car. The door opened slowly a few inches. A tall, thin figure was silhouetted in the frame, peering into the darkness. It wasn't Ethan. It was a man she didn't know, dressed in dark clothes with a cap pulled low over his face. The man switched on a small flashlight, sweeping the beam across the space. The light passed over Ava's head, hidden behind the boxes. It illuminated the open, empty trunk. The man cursed under his breath. He stepped inside cautiously. His silhouette grew closer. Ava held her breath. She could smell his cheap cologne, the scent of tobacco. The man bent down, inspecting the trunk. Ava saw her chance. Just as the man turned, perhaps suspecting someone else was there, she lunged. Not at the man, but at the door. She ran with all her might, slamming the metal door into the man who grunted in surprise. She shot out into the alley, running without looking back. She heard heavy footsteps behind her curses. She turned right, then left, into a maze of narrower alleys. Her lungs burned. She didn't stop until she reached a busier street, blending in with a group of tourists. Only then did she dare to look back. The alley was empty. The man hadn't followed, or he had lost her. She leaned against a wall, panting, her heart about to burst. She was still clutching the hammer. She dropped it into a nearby trash can. Inside her coat, her father's blueprints and documents weighed like a slab. But now so did the certainty. They weren't just after her past. They were after her present, and they knew she was close to the truth. She looked at the address on the key's tag. Forgetting Street. What an appropriate name. Eleanor wanted everything to be forgotten. Her father, his work, his daughter. But Ava wouldn't forget. And now she had the weapons, resemblance, to remind the world. The sound of her own pounding heart echoed in her ears. Ava slipped into the first open doorway. She found an office building with a deserted lobby. She leaned against the cold marble wall, trying to calm her breathing. Outside on the street, people passed by, oblivious. She didn't see the man in the cap, but she knew he hadn't left. He was nearby. She pulled out her phone. Her trembling fingers dialed Paul's number. "Ava," he answered on the first ring, his voice tense. "They followed me to my father's storage unit. Someone tried to get in. I managed to escape." A muffled oath on the other end of the line. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "I'm fine. But they know I was there, or that I've been close." She lowered her voice even more. "I found something, Paul. Proof of what they did to my father. Names, documents. Don't talk on the phone." Paul's voice was an urgent whisper. "Come here to Carmine Street. But don't come directly. Take a cab, get out a few blocks early, walk around. Make sure you're not followed. Come in through the cellar door. You remember?" "Yes, in half an hour." She hung up. Before leaving, she took out her father's small notebook and the documents from the envelope. She quickly photographed them with her phone page by page. Then she uploaded the images to an encrypted folder in the cloud, one she had created months ago for this purpose. She sent the access link and password to 2 email addresses. Sophia's, her lawyer, and a backup account only she knew. If something happened to her, the information wouldn't be lost. She stepped out onto the street, cautiously blending in with a group of tourists, leaving the nearby train station. She took the subway, changed lines twice, and finally emerged several stops later. She hailed a cab and gave a fake address, getting out before arriving. She walked without hurry, but without pause, turning random corners, looking at reflected storefronts until she reached Carmine Street. The back alley was empty. The iron door to Paul's cellar was ajar. Inside, in the back room, she found him shredding documents in a manual paper shredder. A pile of cuttings already filled a box at his feet. "What are you doing?" Ava asked, closing the door behind her. Paul looked up. He had ink stains on his hands and a grim expression. "Cleaning up, just in case. We can't be careless." He stopped shredding. "Show me what you found." Ava spread the documents on the work table, still stained with flour and cocoa. Paul examined them in silence, his expert eyes scrutinizing every line. His face darkened as he read. This is more than I feared," he murmured, pointing to the names. "Elliot Vance. I know him by reputation. A shark, the kind of lawyer who fixes problems for families like the Montgomerys. And Raymond Sterling, that name rings a bell. I think he's retired now, but in his day he had a lot of power in the zoning department." He looked up at Ava. With this, you can not only ruin Eleanor, you can send her and others to prison. But these are events from over 20 years ago, Ava objected, though without conviction. The statute of limitations. Fraud, prevarication, embezzlement. Some of these crimes have very long statutes. And this isn't just the past, Ava. It's the key to the present. If Eleanor did this then and got away with it, it's because she had a system her son Ethan has inherited and perfected. These names, he tapped the paper with a finger, could be the gateway to what's happening now, to the Cayman Islands accounts, to the current bribes. Ava nodded. She had thought so too. I need to talk to this Elliot Vance or someone who knows him. That's dangerous. He's a connected man. Everything is dangerous now, Paul. Ava sat down, suddenly exhausted. I was followed. My sister in London says someone is asking about her. Sophia says Ethan is emptying the company. And last night at that dinner, it was a declaration of war. I can't hide anymore. Paul reflected, wiping his hands on a rag. There's a possibility. A person I've heard about over the years. A woman named Consuelo Ruiz. She was your father's secretary toward the end, the one who stayed with him the longest. When the studio went bankrupt, she disappeared. Moved to some town, I think. But people talk. They say she knows things. Things she never said. Where is she? That's more difficult. Years ago I heard she was in a town in the Catskills or maybe the Berkshires. My memory. Paul gestured in frustration. But I could ask around. I have contacts, old friends from when your mother and I, people who know people. Ask, please. That woman could be the key, a witness. I will, but carefully. Paul put the documents in a clean envelope and gave it to Ava. You keep this somewhere safe, not here. At that moment, Ava's phone vibrated. It was a message from Sophia. Short and urgent. Call me. Urgent. Ava dialed her number. Sophia, what's wrong? Her lawyer's voice was tense, restrained. Ava, I just received a court summons from Ethan. He's filing for divorce on grounds of abandonment and emotional instability. He's attached a private medical report that supposedly certifies you suffer from an anxiety disorder that makes you unfit to make financial decisions. He's requesting preventive custody of all marital assets and the appointment of a court administrator. Basically, he wants to leave you on the street without a cent. Ava felt the floor open up beneath her. It wasn't a surprise, but the speed, the crudeness. A medical report. What's he talking about? I haven't seen any doctor. It's a dirty trick. They have someone who will sign anything for money. But it's plausible, Ava. After your performance last night at the restaurant with that smile, they could argue erratic behavior. And if they manage to freeze your assets, they can't. I have my own accounts, my studio, the little I saved. Your accounts are in your name, but the bulk of the money, the properties, everything is in the name of the marital estate, or directly in the name of Ethan's companies. He has control. If a judge accepts the preliminary injunction, you're cut off. And you'll need money to fight Ava, for lawyers, for investigators. Ava closed her eyes. She could see it. The mousetrap Sophia had talked about was closing around her. Financial pressure, legal pressure, personal pressure. They wanted to suffocate her, make her surrender. It's not going to happen, Sophia. I won't give up. I know. That's why I'm calling. There's something else. I received an anonymous call from a woman. She didn't give her name. She just said she had information that might interest you about your husband. She said if I wanted to know more, I should go to Central Park this afternoon to the Bethesda Terrace. At 5. Ava opened her eyes. A woman. What else did she say? Nothing else. She hung up. It could be a trap, Ava. A way to draw you out, to intimidate you, or to set an ambush. Like at the storage unit. Ava thought. But it could also be Claudia, the mistress. Sophia had mentioned her existence in passing, a woman who might have her own reasons for wanting to hurt Ethan. I'm going, Ava said, with a decisiveness she didn't feel. Ava, it's not wise. We need allies, Sophia. Information from the inside. If this woman has something, it's worth the risk. But I won't go alone. She looked at Paul, who was listening with concern. Paul, can you? The chef nodded slowly. I'll go with you, from a distance, to watch. Thank you. Sophia, stay by the phone. I'll call you after. She hung up. Paul was already grabbing a jacket. Central Park at this hour is crowded. It's a good place for a discreet meeting, but also to get lost. How will you know who she is? She'll find me, Ava said, tucking the envelope with the documents into her bag next to the pepper spray she now carried everywhere. And I'll recognize her. We women of Ethan's have a family resemblance. Bethesda Terrace gleamed under the golden light of the late afternoon. Around it, the lake reflected the trees and the groups of tourists strolling by. Ava sat on a bench with a good view of the approaches, pretending to read a book. Paul was a few yards back, near a newspaper kiosk, wearing sunglasses and a cap, looking like just another tourist. It was 5:05. The woman hadn't appeared. Ava was beginning to think it was a cruel joke or a trap when she saw her. She was impeccably dressed in a cream-colored pantsuit and an expensive handbag, tall, slender, with dark hair pulled back in a perfect bun. She was accompanied by a small boy of about 3 who was pulling at her hand, pointing toward the ducks in the lake. But her dark, anxious eyes were scanning the area, searching until they landed on Ava. Their gazes met. The woman paled slightly. She said something to the child, left him with a nanny Ava hadn't noticed before, and walked toward the bench. She walked with elegance, but with tension. She sat down next to her without looking at her, fixing her gaze on the fountain. Thank you for coming, she said, in a low, well-modulated voice. Claudia? Ava asked, without preamble. The woman gave a slight nod. Yes, Claudia Hayes. And you are Ava, the wife. For the first time, she looked at her. Her eyes were beautiful, but marked by fatigue, and something else, fear. I know I have no right to ask you for anything or to expect your trust, but I need to talk to someone. And you are the only person he has hurt more than me. Ava noted the sincerity in her voice, or at least a convincing version of it. Why? What has he done? Claudia took a deep breath. She toyed nervously with the ring on her finger, a large diamond, but of a design that seemed familiar to Ava. Ethan had once shown it to her, saying it was for a special client. A lie, like everything else. I've been with him for 4 years. I started as his lawyer at Montgomery Holdings. Then, you know, promises, lies. The same old story. Her voice trembled slightly. A year ago, I got pregnant. At first, he seemed happy. Then when Leo was born... She glanced toward the child now feeding the ducks under the watchful eye of the nanny. Things changed. He wanted me to give him up for adoption, to hide him, said it wasn't the right time. When I refused, the threats began. Subtle at first, then more direct. He said he would ruin my career, that he would make me lose custody, that no one would believe a scorned mistress over him. And the ring? Ava asked, pointing to her hand. Claudia gave a bitter smile. A bait. To shut me up, to make me think that one day. She took it off. It's fake. Cubic zirconia. Just like his promises. A week ago he told me he was leaving, that he had to sort out his affairs, that he couldn't continue with this. He offered me money, a ridiculous amount, in exchange for my silence and for me to leave New York with Leo. And you don't want to leave. I can't. The cry was muffled, but full of desperation. My life is here, my work. And he wants Leo, but as a possession, something to control, not as a son. I know if I leave, he will find me and take him from me. He has the means, the contacts. Ava watched her. The fear was real, the pain too, but she needed more. And why come to me? I'm the last person who should help you. Because you know him, because you know what he's capable of, and because Claudia lowered her voice even more, because I know things about his business, about the transfers, the offshore accounts, the bribes to officials to get building permits. I've seen it. I've signed some documents, not really knowing what I was doing at first until I realized. And now with this divorce, with the pressure he's under, he's desperate. He's making very risky moves, and his mother is pushing him. She's the one really pulling the strings. Ava nodded slowly. It was confirmation of what she already knew, but from the inside, a first-hand account. What do you want in return? Ava asked directly. Claudia looked surprised by the frankness. Help. For me and Leo. Protection. To testify against him if necessary, but with guarantees. I want to disappear, start over far from here. But I need a safe passage, and enough money to never have to look back. I don't have money, Claudia. He's taking everything from me. But you have this, Claudia said, pulling a small, thin envelope from her bag. I found it months ago in his study, in a folder I shouldn't have opened, but I did just in case. Ava took the envelope. Inside were several photocopies, Swiss bank statements, transfers to names she recognized from her father's documents, Elliot Vance, Raymond Sterling. But there were also new names, and most importantly, a draft contract for the sale of a shell company signed by Ethan for a value of several million. A company that appeared as the owner of a plot of land in Florida. A plot Ava knew was contaminated and unbuildable. It was outright fraud, a way to siphon money out of Montgomery Holdings and into a black hole. With this and my testimony, we can sink him, Claudia whispered, her eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. But I need your word that when this is over, Leo and I will be safe, far away. Ava looked at the documents. They were the missing piece, the link between the crimes of the past and those of the present, the proof that Eleanor's system was still operating through her son. You have my word, Ava said, putting the documents away. But I need more. I need you to stay where you are, to act normally, to let me know of any move Ethan makes, any order from his mother. And I need access to his computers, his files. Can you do that? Claudia hesitated, biting her lip. Then she nodded. Yes. He still trusts me or thinks he has me under control. I can access his laptop. He has all the passwords written down in an encrypted file, but I know the password. It's the name of his first yacht. Arrogant. She gave a sad smile. I know because he told me one drunken night. He never changes his passwords. Perfect. Ava stood up. Let's not meet in person again. It's too risky. Use this number to contact me. She passed her a slip of paper with a burner phone number. And be careful, if he suspects. I've been careful for a year. I know how to move. Claudia also stood. She looked at Ava with something akin to admiration. Last night at the restaurant, when you smiled, everyone thought you were crazy, but I understood. That's the smile of someone who is no longer afraid. Ava didn't reply. She just gave a slight nod and turned, walking toward where Paul was waiting, pretending to read a newspaper. When she joined him, walking in the opposite direction, Claudia had already rejoined her son and the nanny, moving away in the other direction. Well, Paul asked in a low voice. We have an ally on the inside, Ava said without slowing her pace. And we have the smoking gun. Now we just need to aim and fire. What's the plan? Ava looked toward Bethesda Terrace, glowing faintly in the twilight. Next week, Eleanor is hosting her annual charity gala at the family mansion in Greenwich. All of New York's high society will be there. The journalists, the bankers, the politicians. It's the event of the year for the Montgomerys, where they show their best face, their facade of perfection. Paul looked at her, slowly understanding. You're not thinking. It's the perfect place, Ava said. And a cold glint shone in her eyes, the same determination Paul had seen in her mother so many years ago. Where they publicly humiliated me is where their world will collapse, in front of everyone. I'm taking the war to their territory, Paul. And this time I won't smile until I see their masks fall. They walked in silence, lost in their thoughts. The alliance with Claudia was risky, but necessary. The information she brought was pure dynamite. But Ava knew it was a race against time. Ethan and Eleanor were moving fast, trying to corner her legally and financially. She had to move faster, and she had to be flawless. One mistake, and she wouldn't just lose. She'd end up like her father, broken, forgotten, or worse. As they crossed the threshold of the park, her phone vibrated again. It was a message from an unknown number. It just said, "Be careful with Sterling. He's not retired. He's with them. They're watching you." Claudia. She was already delivering. Ava deleted the message, but the words were burned into her mind. They're watching you. She knew it. She felt it in every shadow, every reflection. But now she had eyes on the inside, too. And soon it would be her turn to speak. The fine rain covered the windshield of the rental car. Ava had left hers in a garage just in case. Paul drove with fierce concentration, his large hands gripping the wheel tightly. They had left the city before dawn, taking back roads. The lead on Consuelo, her father's former secretary, had taken them to a small town in upstate New York called Val de Lozoya, a place barely on the maps. My contact says she's lived here for 20 years, Paul said. Breaking the silence, interrupted only by the windshield wipers. She works as a caretaker for a rich Englishman's house who only comes in the summer. The rest of the year she lives alone, barely talks to anyone. How did you know she was here? Ava asked, looking at the grey landscape of oaks and rocks. An old cheese supplier of mine has a cousin in this town. He mentioned a very reserved woman from the city living here who'd been a secretary to a famous architect. It had to be her. Paul gestured uncertainly. I hope she's the right one. The town was a handful of stone houses clustered on a hillside. The rain made it seem deserted, melancholic. Paul parked next to a mossy stone fountain. A faded sign pointed to the Englishman's house 500 yards. They walked up a muddy path under the persistent drizzle. The house was a large, dark stone construction with a slate roof and a neglected garden. It seemed asleep. Paul knocked on the heavy wooden door. A long time passed. Ava was beginning to think no one was there when they heard shuffling steps. The door opened a few inches, secured by a chain. An eye, surrounded by deep wrinkles, scrutinized them with suspicion. Yes. The voice was rough, like two stones rubbing together. Consuelo Ruiz? Paul asked in his kindest tone. The eye hardened. Doesn't live here. You're mistaken. The door began to close, but Ava reacted. Wait, please. I'm Ava. Ava Sola, David Sola's daughter. The name had an effect. The door stopped. The eye examined her again, closer this time, with an intensity that made Ava's skin prickle. It can't be. It's... the voice murmured. David. Please. Mrs. Ruiz, I need to talk to you. My father. I need to know the truth about what happened to him. Another long silence. Then the sound of the chain sliding the door opening. The woman before them was petite, stooped with age, dressed in a thick sweater and a dark skirt. Her hair, completely white, was pulled into a messy bun, but her steely grey eyes shone with a sharp intelligence and a deep sadness. "Come in," she said, turning and leading them down a dark hallway to a large old-fashioned but warm kitchen. It smelled of burnt wood and chamomile. A kettle whistled softly on the wood-burning stove. "Sit down," she ordered, pointing to the wooden table. She filled 3 porcelain cups with the tea. "I don't get visitors, especially not from the city." She looked directly at Ava. "But you have his nose, David's, and your mother's eyes. Isabel. How is she?" "She passed away years ago," Ava said softly. "Cancer." Consuelo closed her eyes for a moment, as if taking a blow. "I'm sorry. She was a good woman, too good for this world, like your father." She opened her eyes, and now there were tears in them. "And what brings David's daughter to this God-forsaken hole after all this time?" "The truth," Ava repeated. "I know my father was ruined. I know the Montgomerys had something to do with it. I found documents names, Elliot Vance, Raymond Sterling. But I need to know more. I need to understand what happened and why." Consuelo took a sip of tea, her hands trembling. Elliot Vance, a vulture in a suit. Raymond Sterling, a corrupt pawn. But the head, the one who orchestrated it all, was her, Eleanor Montgomery. She said the name, her voice filled with an ancient, well-preserved resentment. "Your father rejected her and she never forgave him. First she tried to buy him, then to destroy him. When he won the Mirador competition, she pulled her strings. The developer went bankrupt. The banks denied him credit. The clients disappeared. It was like a spider's web, each thread pulling another until he couldn't move." "I found proof of that," Ava said. "Transfers, payments. That's just money." Consuelo cut her off disdainfully. The worst was something else. The theft wasn't just of his project. They stole his name, his reputation. She stood up with effort and went to an old cabinet. She took out a small black leather notebook worn with use. She placed it on the table in front of Ava. His diary. The real one, not the one he kept at home. This is the work one, where he noted everything. His ideas, his meetings, his suspicions. Her finger, its knuckles deformed by arthritis, caressed the cover. "He gave it to me the day he closed the studio. He said, 'Consuelo, keep this for me. Someday someone will have to know the truth. And you are the only person I trust completely.' I left the city shortly after, in fear. They had tried to buy me off, to make me say your father was incompetent, a dreamer who wasted money. When I refused, the threats started. Late-night calls. One day I found the tires of my car slashed. That's when I knew I had to leave." Ava opened the diary. Her father's quick, confident handwriting filled the pages. Meeting notes, sketches, phone numbers. And in the final pages, dates and names lists of suspicious payments, and one sentence underlined forcefully. "Eleanor Montgomery behind it all. Has a man in zoning Sterling and an unscrupulous lawyer Vance. They want the Mirador project but with another architect. Wallace, a puppet. They're offering me money to cede the rights, a pittance. If I refuse, they'll ruin me. What do I do?" Ava turned the pages, another entry a few weeks later. "Meeting with Sterling. More pressure. He's threatening me with licensing problems for all my current projects if I don't accept. Says I have a week to decide. I've spoken to Isabel. She doesn't want me to give in. She says we'll fight. But I see the fear in her eyes and the fear in my little girl's eyes. God, what have I done? The last entry, dated just days before the studio finally went bankrupt, read, "I've made a decision. I can't give in. I won't give them the satisfaction. But I can't drag my family into total ruin either. I've contacted an old colleague, Anthony Martin. I will give him copies of everything I have, and Consuelo the diary. If something happens to me, if I have an accident, as Vance has hinted, at least there will be proof. I hope Isabel and the girls will be safe. And I hope that one day someone will make these people pay." Ava looked up, her eyes full of angry tears. They hinted he could have an accident. Consuelo nodded, pale. "Elliot Vance. In the last meeting, when your father refused to yield, he told him, 'David, life has many turns. Sometimes the streets are slippery. Sometimes people get distracted. It would be a shame if something happened to you, with such a young family depending on you.' It was a clear threat. After that, your father was a shadow of himself. He knew they weren't just after his work. They were after him." "And why didn't he go to the police?" Paul asked, his deep voice full of outrage. "With what proof they were just words? And the Montgomerys had, and still have, half the city in their pocket. Which police officer would he go to? Which judge?" Consuelo shook her head. No, he knew. The only way was to hide the evidence and wait. Wait for someone with courage, or with as much to lose as he had to bring it to light. She looked at Ava. "I suppose that someone is you. And this diary? No one else has seen it. No one. It's been buried in a cookie tin under a flagstone in the garden for 20 years. Until today." Consuelo sighed. "Now it's yours. Do what you have to do with it. But be careful, child. That woman Eleanor is dangerous. She hasn't changed. She's only become more powerful and more ruthless." "I know," Ava said, closing the diary and reverently placing it in her bag with the other documents. "But now I have this, and I have witnesses. You, if you're willing." Consuelo hesitated. The fear was evident in her eyes. Then she looked around at the poor but warm kitchen, her refuge for 2 decades. "I've lived in fear for too long, out of cowardice because I wanted to live in peace." She took a deep breath. "David was good to me. Isabel too. If I can help their daughter. Yes, I will testify, if necessary. Tell me what I must do." Ava felt immense relief. She wasn't alone. She had Paul, Sophia, Claudia on the inside, and now Consuelo, a direct witness to the original conspiracy. "For now, stay here and be alert. If anyone asks about you, if you see anything strange, call me immediately at this number." She gave her a card with the burner phone number. "Don't talk to anyone about our visit. I will tell you soon what the next step is." Consuelo nodded. She walked them to the door. The drizzle had stopped, leaving a low, leaden sky. "One more thing, Ava," Consuelo said, gripping her hand with surprising strength. "Your father, in his final days, was obsessed with a name, a place he overheard by chance in a conversation between Vance and Sterling. Cortijo de las Animas, Ranch of the Souls. He wrote it in the diary, but he didn't know what it was. He said it sounded like a place for ghosts. Maybe it means nothing, but he thought it was important, that it was where they were hiding something, maybe the money, maybe something worse." Ranch of the Souls. The name echoed in Ava's mind. It meant nothing to her, but she filed it away. "Thank you, Consuelo, for everything. Go with God, child, and hit them where it hurts the most." The drive back to the city was silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Ava leafed through her father's diary under the dimming twilight. The entries were a map of despair, but also of tenacity. Her father hadn't given up. He had saved proof. He had waited. Now it was her turn. As they reached the outskirts of the city, her phone vibrated. It was Sophia. Her lawyer's voice was tense, almost panicked. Ava, where are you? Driving back. What's wrong? They've moved. A judge has accepted the preliminary injunction. All your accounts, those in your name, and the joint ones are frozen. You can't withdraw money, you can't sell or mortgage any assets. And there's more. She paused, taking a breath. Ethan's company, Montgomery Holdings, has filed a lawsuit against you for theft of trade secrets and corporate espionage. They claim they found confidential company files on your personal computer that you copied them to sell to competitors. Ava felt the world collapsing. It was a masterstroke, ruthless. Not only did it leave her without resources, it criminalized her. That's a lie. I know, Ava, but they've presented evidence. Screenshots, access logs, all fabricated but convincing. The police could come looking for you for questioning. And if you're detained even for a few hours, it would be a media disaster. They'd paint you as a thief, a lunatic. All your credibility would be gone. What do I do? Ava asked, hating the desperate tone in her voice. For now, don't go to your house or any known place. Do you have a safe place to stay? Ava looked at Paul. He nodded immediately, no questions asked. Yes, I have a place. Good. Stay there. Tomorrow morning I'll file an appeal to lift the injunction and we'll counter-sue with the divorce petition for psychological abuse and infidelity using the evidence we have on Ethan. But I need time, Ava. And I need you off the radar. Don't use your cards. Don't call anyone from your regular number. Understood? Understood. And one more thing. Your friend, the one on the inside. What about her? Ethan has fired the entire staff of his legal department overnight. Her too. Officially for cutbacks. But I've heard rumors. Rumors that he suspects a leak, that someone is passing information. If he thinks it's her, Ava hung up her heart, frozen. Claudia. If Ethan had fired her, it was because he suspected, or because he wanted her away out of his sphere of control, so he could act against her without witnesses. She had to warn her. She dialed Claudia's burner number. It rang and rang until it went to voicemail. This is Claudia. Please leave a message. Claudia, it's me. Call me as soon as you can. It's urgent. Be careful. He knows something. She hung up, cursing silently. She looked out the window. The city approached a sea of lights under the dark sky, a sea that suddenly felt full of sharks. Paul, she said, her voice barely a whisper, take me to your back room. And then I need a favor. A very big favor. Anything, Ava. Whatever you need. I need to get into Montgomery Holdings, into Ethan's office, tonight. The air in Paul's back room was thick-heavy with the smell of reheated coffee and tension. Consuelo's documents were spread across the table alongside David's diary. Ava stared at them without seeing. Her mind was elsewhere in Ethan's office in the glass tower of Montgomery Holdings. You can't be serious, Ava, Paul said, rubbing his face with his hands. Breaking into his office is insane. It's exactly what they want for you to make a mistake, to do something illegal. If they catch you, all this proof will be useless. You'll go to jail. If we don't do something, I'll go to jail anyway, Ava retorted, her voice flat. The trade secrets lawsuit is fake, but it's believable. I need something more. Something that proves beyond a doubt that he's behind everything. The Cayman Islands accounts the current bribes. I need access to his computer, his paper files. Claudia said she had the passwords, but now she's not answering. I don't know if she's okay or... She left the sentence hanging. The fear for Claudia and her son was a knot in her stomach. Even so, the building will have security. Cameras, guards. Not at night. Not in the executive area. Years ago, Ethan took me there once to pick up some documents. It was late. Everything was open. They're overconfident. They think their power protects them, that no one would dare challenge them on their own turf. Ava looked up at Paul. I'm not asking you to come with me, just to get me one thing. Paul stared at her, then sighed in resignation. What thing? A pass. A temporary company ID for cleaning or maintenance staff. Something that will let me get past the main reception without raising suspicion late in the afternoon, when there are still people, but most have left. Paul considered it, his fingers drumming on the table. I might be able to get you a generic access card, the kind external cleaning companies use. They're universal for buildings in that area. I have a guy who supplies uniforms and credentials to those companies. It's a very big and expensive favor. Pay him whatever he asks. I'll get the money. How Sophia said your accounts are frozen. Ava stood and went to her purse hanging on the back of a chair. She took out a small travel jewelry box and opened it. Inside were no expensive jewels, just a few simple pieces. And in a hidden compartment, a necklace. It was simple gold with a small emerald pendant, the last valuable thing she had left from her mother. Isabel had given it to her on her wedding day. So you'll always wear something green, something that grows even when everything around you seems grey. This is worth something, sell it. Paul looked at her, then at the necklace, and shook his head firmly. No, you're not selling this. I'll put up the money. It's an investment. Before Ava could protest, he continued. But in return, I'm going with you. You're not going alone. If something goes wrong, two heads are better than one. And I know that building. Years ago, before I opened the Astoria room, I catered an event on their rooftop. I know the service entrances. Ava wanted to refuse to protect him, but the determination in Paul's eyes was unwavering. She nodded, feeling a bittersweet relief. She wasn't alone. Okay. When? Tonight. My contact can have the card and a couple of generic cleaning uniforms by this evening. We'll go at the shift change around 7. People are leaving, the cleaners are coming in. We'll blend in. You go into the office. I'll keep watch in the hall. 30 minutes, Ava. No more. No matter what you find or don't find in 30 minutes, we leave. 30 minutes, Ava agreed. The burner phone rang. It was Claudia. Ava snatched it up. Claudia, are you okay? Ava. Claudia's voice was a gasp, as if she'd been running. I'm sorry I couldn't talk. I had to leave my apartment. Ethan came this morning. With 2 thugs. No, he didn't do anything physical. He just interrogated me. Wanted to know if I'd spoken to anyone, if I'd copied anything. I denied everything, of course, but he didn't believe me. He said he knew there was a rat in his organization and he would find it. And when he did, he'd make sure it could never harm anyone again. Then he fired me with a ridiculous severance and told me to get out of New York, that if he saw me in the city after this week, he wouldn't be responsible for what might happen to me. Where are you now, and Leo? We're safe. A place I won't say even on the phone with a lifelong friend. But we can't stay here long. Ava, I have to get far away. And I need the money we talked about. I don't have it yet, Claudia. But I will. After the gala. I promise. But I need your help one more time. Tonight. I need to get into his office. At Montgomery Holdings. A panicked silence on the other end of the line. You're crazy. It's a surefire trap. As of yesterday, he's changed all the passwords. I know because I tried to remotely access some files for more security, and they didn't work anymore. And he's hired a private security guy to watch the executive floor at night. A very dangerous ex-cop. His name is also Montgomery, ironically. Louis Montgomery. No relation, but just as ruthless. Ava exchanged a look with Paul. This changed things. He changed all the passwords. Are you sure? His laptop won't accept the old one, and the desktop in the office has a new two-factor authentication system. You won't get in without his phone. Claudia paused. But there's something else. Something that might be more valuable than the computer files. What? A physical notebook. Ethan is paranoid about technology. He doesn't trust computers for the most sensitive things. The dirtiest stuff, the offshore account numbers not in company names, the codes, the names of his contacts in government and the police. He writes it all down by hand. In a black leather-bound notebook with a metal clasp. He keeps it in a secret compartment in his desk. The top right drawer has a false bottom. It's activated by pressing a specific spot on the side. The notebook is inside. Ava remembered Ethan's monumental mahogany desk. He was always bragging about it. And you know where the spot is? Yes, I can describe it to you. But Ava, it's too risky. If that guard Louis is around, we have to try. It's our only shot at getting something irrefutable, something that can't be deleted or faked. Ava took a deep breath. Send me an exact description by text. Then turn off this phone and don't turn it on until tomorrow. And Claudia, get ready. After tonight, everything is going to move very fast. Have your passport ready. They are. Good luck, Ava. And be safe. She hung up. Minutes later, a text arrived with a detailed diagram of the desk and instructions for opening the hideaway. Paul let out a long sigh. A private security guard. This is getting complicated. Yes, but we have an advantage. He's not expecting us. He thinks I'm cornered, scared dealing with lawyers. He doesn't think I dare do this. Arrogance is his weak point. Paul nodded slowly. Then a sly smile spread across his face. Maybe there's a way to distract this Louis Montgomery. The building has systems, right? Fire alarms, for example. If, let's say, there was a small, harmless bit of smoke on the ground floor near the electrical panel's protocol, would force the guard to go down and investigate, at least for a few minutes. Long enough. Ava looked at him alarmed. Start a fire. Not a fire. Smoke. A small controlled theatrical smoke bomb. My contact, the one for the cards, could get something like that. He's a man of varied resources. Ava thought about it. It was another risk, another crime. But the image of the black notebook filled with handwritten truths was too tempting. Do it. But nothing that can cause real damage. Just smoke. And disconnected before the fire department arrives. Don't worry, I know smoke. It's my specialty in a way. Paul already had his phone in hand. I'll make the calls. You rest. It's going to be a long night. At 6:45 p.m., Ava and Paul were staked out in an old rental car a block from the Montgomery Holdings Tower. They wore unflattering grey uniforms from Express Clean. Ava had her hair pulled back in a tight bun and wore myopic glasses with non-prescription lenses. Paul looked like a tired, nondescript maintenance man. They carried 2 buckets and mops as props. The card opens the loading and service doors and gives access to the staff elevators, Paul reviewed in a low voice. We'll go up to the 22nd floor, the executive one. The emergency stairwell is next to the restrooms. That's our escape route if things go wrong. At 7:15 sharp, my contact will set off the smoke bomb in the utility room on the ground floor. That will trigger the local alarm. Hopefully it'll draw our guard. We'll have maybe 10 minutes, 12 at most. Understood, Ava said with a calm she didn't feel. Her hands were sweaty inside the rubber gloves. At 7 p.m. sharp, they crossed the street and headed for the service entrance in a side alley. Ava swiped the card through the reader. A green light blinked and the door buzzed open. Her heart pounded. They were in. The service lobby was empty except for a few stacked boxes. A freight elevator was open. They got in. Paul pressed the button for the 22nd floor. The elevator ascended with a slow groan. When the doors opened, they faced a long, carpeted hallway, silent as a tomb. To the left, the doors to the vice president's offices. At the far end to the right, the double oak doors of Ethan's office. And sitting in a folding chair next to the door was a man. It was Louis Montgomery, just as Claudia had described him, broad-shouldered, bald, with an expression of vigilant boredom. He was watching a football game on a tablet with the volume low. Hearing the elevator, he looked up. His small, bright eyes scanned them. "Hey, what are you doing here?" he asked in a rough voice. "This floor isn't scheduled for cleaning until 9. Paul coughed, feigning confusion. "Oh no, the sheet said 7 floor 22. New boss, new schedules, you know how it is. A mess. If you want, we can go down and ask." The guard looked at them suspiciously, but before he could say anything, a sharp beep came from the radio on his shoulder. A distorted voice said, "Alert smoke in the meter room ground floor. Proceed to investigate Louis." The guard swore, jumping to his feet. He hesitated, looking at Ava and Paul, then at Ethan's office doors, and finally at the elevator. The priority was clear: the incident on the ground floor. "Stay here. Don't touch anything. I'll be back in 5 minutes," he ordered, and took off running toward the emergency stairs, preferring them to the slow freight elevator. As soon as the stairwell door closed behind him, Ava and Paul moved. 10 minutes, Paul whispered, positioning himself as a lookout in front of the elevator. "I'll warn you if he comes back fast." Ava ran to the oak doors. They were closed but not locked. Ethan was so arrogant, he trusted his personal guard. She opened them and slipped inside, closing them behind her. The office was enormous, with panoramic views of a city just beginning to light up. It was all cold, impersonal luxury. Ava didn't waste time on the view. She went straight to the monumental mahogany desk. She sat in Ethan's chair. It was still warm. A wave of revulsion washed over her. She took a deep breath and focused. The top right drawer. She opened it. Inside were the usual expensive desk accessories. She emptied it all onto the desk without care. Then she felt the inside of the drawer. Smooth wood. She remembered Claudia's diagram. She pressed her fingers on the right side about 4 inches from the front, near a small, irregular grain pattern. An almost inaudible click. The bottom of the drawer lifted slightly at one end. Ava lifted it. Underneath, in a hollow lined with black felt, was the notebook. It had a plain black leather cover with a simple metal clasp. It looked innocuous, perfect for hiding in plain sight. Ava grabbed it, opened it. The pages were filled with Ethan's tight, angular handwriting. Account numbers, bank names. Switzerland, Cayman Islands, Singapore. Amounts, dates, codes, and names. Many names. Some she recognized: mid-level politicians, officials, judges. Others were new. And on one specially marked page, a diagram. A payment flowchart with arrows leading to a company called Gold Coast Investments, Inc., the same one that had ruined her father. And from there, arrows to an account in Liechtenstein in the name of E.V. Elliot Vance, and a thicker arrow to a foundation in Panama. The foundation bore a name, the Eleanor Montgomery Foundation. There it was, the direct connection. The dirty money of the present, funding his mother's charity foundation, the perfect facade. Ava took out her phone and started photographing the pages one by one. Flash off. Her heart was beating so hard she feared it could be heard outside. She turned page after page. Bribes for building permits, payments to journalists to silence scandals, transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands in the name of L. Montgomery, Louis Montgomery. The guard was on the payroll, too. It had been almost 8 minutes. She had photographed over 30 pages. She heard 3 soft knocks on the door. Paul's signal, hurry up. She was almost done. She turned one more page and froze. This page had no numbers. It had names and photos cut out and pasted. Her photo, her sister Eleanor's, Sophia's her lawyer, Paul's taken in front of his restaurant, and Consuelo's an old but unmistakable photo. Next to each photo notes, next to Consuelo's upstate New York, monitor, next to Paul's knew the mother, inquire, next to Sophia's pressure via bar association, and next to her and Eleanor's photos, Ava proceed with lawsuit/discredit. Elena find weak point. Debts in UK. They weren't just after her. They were after everyone she knew. They had a file, a plan to methodically dismantle her life and her support network person by person. With hands now trembling with rage, she photographed that page too. Then she heard the signal again. 2 quick knocks. Danger. She stuffed the notebook into the large pocket of her uniform. She replaced the false bottom of the drawer. She put the desk accessories back inside, closed it. She took a quick look to make sure everything seemed normal. Then she slipped out of the office, closing the door softly. Paul was by the elevator acting nonchalant, but his posture was rigid. "Take the stairs," he whispered, without looking at her. "He's coming up in the elevator. I heard him call. He's angry. The smoke was a false alarm. He suspects." Ava nodded and headed for the emergency stairwell door, just as the main elevator doors on the other side of the hall dinged open. "Hey, you!" Louis Montgomery's voice roared. Ava didn't turn back. She pushed through the stairwell door and ran down 2 steps at a time, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the concrete well. She heard the door open behind her and heavy footsteps begin to descend as well. "Stop! Halt! Or I'll shoot! Shoot!" He had a gun. Ava didn't know, but she didn't stop. She kept going. The notebook banging against her hip with every movement, the cold air of the stairwell whipped at her face. Floor 12-8. The steps behind her sounded closer. He was in better shape. On the 5th floor landing, Ava saw a door marked Maintenance Basement. She kicked it open and ducked into a dark corridor full of pipes and wires. She ran blindly, tripping over boxes until she found another door. She pushed. It led to another narrower service staircase. She went down 1 more floor and found herself in a basement filled with trash dumpsters and the hum of freezers. She crouched behind a large metal container, panting, trying not to make a sound. She heard the footsteps above at the maintenance door stop. Then a curse. The man was hesitating, unsure where she had gone. She pulled out her phone. No service. Of course. She was underground. She prayed Paul had been able to escape another way. The footsteps moved away, going back up perhaps to get reinforcements or to watch the exits. Ava waited, counting to 200, her heart in her throat. Then she slipped out of her hiding place. In the dim light, she saw an arrow that said, "Loading dock." She followed the arrow, passing mountains of boxes, until she reached a large, closed metal door. It had an emergency push bar. She shoved it. The door swung open onto a dark, damp back alley. The cold night air hit her. She was out, a block from where they had left the car. No one was around. She took off the cap and vest of her uniform, stuffed them in a nearby dumpster, and began to walk quickly, but not running, blending in with the people coming out of nearby theaters. 10 minutes later, she reached the car. Paul wasn't there. She waited with the engine running, watching all the mirrors. 5 minutes. 10. She was about to go look for him when the passenger door opened and he slid in panting, his uniform wrinkled and a grease stain on his face. "Lock it. Let's go," he said breathlessly. Ava pulled away and merged into traffic. "What happened?" she asked when they were a few blocks away. "After you went down, he came out of the elevator. He saw me, asked me questions. I said my partner felt sick, went down for air. He didn't believe me. He asked for my ID. I showed him the fake card. He looked at it and knew instantly it was fake. He grabbed my arm. I managed to break free, threw the mop bucket at his legs, and went down the emergency stairs in the opposite direction from you. I got out through the parking garage, got lost among the cars, took a huge detour to get here." He rubbed his wrist, which was starting to bruise. "That guy's got the strength of an ape." "I'm sorry, Paul." "Don't be sorry, did you get it?" Ava nodded, touching the bulge of the notebook in her pocket. "I got it, and more than I expected. They have a file on all of us. On Consuelo, on you, on my sister." Paul let out a low whistle. "Then we have no time to waste. We have to act before they do." "The gala," Ava said, her voice firm. "It's in 2 days. That's our moment. Everything has to be ready. Sophia, the papers. You making sure we can get in. Consuelo ready to testify. Claudia ready to flee. And me with this." She clutched the notebook. "I'm going to give him his gift back right in his face in front of all of New York." As she drove toward the relative safety of the back room, Ava felt the weight of the notebook like a loaded weapon. She had the proof now. Her father's diary, Ethan's notebook, the past and the present, linked by the same greed and evil. The Montgomerys' gala would no longer be a celebration of their power. It would be their social funeral. And she, the failed one, would be the funeral director. But first, she had to make sure all her allies were safe. Because she knew now, without a doubt, that the war was total, and they had no limits. The mirror in the small safe house apartment reflected a woman Ava barely recognized. She was not the submissive wife, nor the humiliated victim. She wore a red dress, simple but impeccably cut, the color of war of warning. She wore no jewelry except for the small emerald pendant from her mother, which Paul had miraculously recovered from the pawnbroker. In her clutch, there was no makeup, only a USB drive, the remote for a wireless projector, and her phone loaded with files scheduled to be sent to 3 major newspapers and the district attorney's office at exactly 9:30 p.m. in 30 minutes. Paul entered the room, dressed in the immaculate uniform of a catering manager from Luna Catering, the ghost company he had created for this night. He had secured the last-minute contract for the Eleanor Montgomery Foundation's charity gala. His eyes swept over Ava, and he nodded in approval. "Are you ready, Mubti?" "Everything is ready. Sophia and an agent from the Economic Crimes Unit are among the service staff near the electrical panel. Consuelo is in a car 2 blocks away, with a TV news van that has kindly offered its services. Your sister Elena is controlling the live stream from the van. When you give the signal, she'll start recording and broadcasting on 3 social media platforms." He paused. "Claudia and her son are on a plane to Buenos Aires. They took off an hour ago, with the money you sent them." Ava nodded. The money had come from the discreet sale of a forgotten watch of Ethan's, plus a contribution from Paul. It was enough to start a new life. And Ethan is in the main ballroom playing the fool with a cocktail in his hand, very sure of himself. Eleanor is on her throne receiving homage. They suspect nothing. They've beefed up security at the door. but they don't expect the attack to come from within, and certainly not from the kitchen. Paul handed her a small audio device, a tiny microphone. So we can hear everything, and so if something goes wrong, we can raise the alarm. Ava clipped it to the inside of her dress. Thank you, Paul, for everything. Don't thank me yet. Wait until this is over. Now let's go. It's your time. The Montgomery mansion in Greenwich glittered like a vulgar diamond that night. Luxury cars paraded up the driveway. Discreet string music filtered through the open windows. Ava arrived on foot from a side street like a shadow. At the entrance, she showed an invitation that Sophia had masterfully forged. The security guard, the same Louis Montgomery, looked at her with a mixture of contempt and surprise. His narrowed eyes betrayed recognition, but the invitation was flawless, and throwing her out would cause a scene. With a grunt, he let her pass. The ballroom was a sea of expensive dresses, fake laughter, and air conditioning. Ava stopped at the threshold looking for them. She found them quickly. Ethan by the marble fireplace telling an anecdote to a group of smiling politicians. Eleanor on a central sofa, like an old venomous queen accepting compliments. It was Eleanor who saw her first. Her pale eyes locked on Ava like daggers of ice. A cruel smile formed on her thin lips. She said something to the woman beside her, and then, in a clear voice that cut through the surrounding conversation, she called out, "Well, look who deigns to appear. My daughter-in-law. I thought after your last performance you would have learned to stay in your place, or in your asylum." An uncomfortable silence spread. All eyes turned to Ava. Ethan spun around, his expression of annoyance transforming into rage when he saw her. "What are you doing here?" he snapped, striding toward her. "You're not invited. Get out immediately before you're thrown out." Ava didn't move. She smiled, the same calm, maddening smile from the birthday dinner. "I've come to give my donation, Ethan. After all, it's a charity gala, and I want to contribute to your mother's cause." Eleanor rose with icy elegance. "We want nothing from you, Ava. Your very presence here is an offense. Louis, remove her." The guard. Louis appeared at her side, grabbing Ava's arm forcefully, but she didn't resist. She raised her voice, addressing the room. "It's a shame because my donation is the truth, and the truth, they say, will set you free. Although in your case it will make you poor and probably take away your freedom." Murmurs, some nervous laughter. Ethan's face was pale with rage. "Are you on drugs? Is that it? Or has your instability gotten worse?" he yelled to a group of people. "Excuse me, my wife, as you know, is not well. The doctors... The doctors you bought..." "Yes." Ava cut him off, shaking Louis's arm with a strength that surprised everyone. "Let go of me, or I will show everyone the monthly transfer Ethan Montgomery makes to your Cayman Islands account, Mr. Montgomery." Louis's eyes widened. His hand fell away. Ava smoothed the sleeve of her dress. "What is she talking about?" asked a man in a suit, a prominent banker. "She's talking nonsense," Ethan roared, but a bead of sweat ran down his temple. "She's sick. A resentful woman Louis called the police." "No need," Ava said. She pulled the remote from her clutch and pressed a button. On the large projection screen behind the orchestra, where images of the Foundation's charitable projects were supposed to be shown, a sharp image appeared. It was a page from Ethan's black notebook. His handwriting unmistakable. A Swiss account number. The amount $3 million. The date, 2 months after the Foundation received a $3 million public grant to help disadvantaged children. A collective gasp went through the room. Eleanor clutched her chest. "It's a fake!" Ethan shrieked, lunging toward Ava. But Paul in his waiter's uniform appeared from nowhere and interposed his solid presence. "A fake," Ava said, switching to the next image. Here are the transfers from the foundation to your mother's account in Panama. And here, she switched again, are the payments to Elliot Vance's lawyer for consulting services, which included bribing a judge to shelve the investigation into the fatal workplace accident at a Montgomery Holdings construction site 5 years ago. Chaos erupted. Shouts. The few journalists present pushed forward with their phones. The politician tried to exit discreetly. Eleanor, pale as death, screamed at the guards to turn off the screen. But Sophia from the electrical panel had locked the controls. "It's a lie! All manipulated by this lunatic!" Ethan roared, but his voice was breaking. "And this is a lie too?" Ava asked with terrifying calm. On the screen appeared photos of her father's documents, the blueprint for the Mirador building signed by David Solar, and next to it, the photo of the built building signed by Wallace. And then Consuelo's documents, Eleanor's transfers through Gold Coast Investments to buy off the architect Wallace and the official Sterling to steal the project and ruin my father. She turned to the room, her voice ringing out clear. 30 years ago, Eleanor Montgomery ruined and robbed my father because he rejected her. And 5 days ago, she tried to ruin me for the same reason. Because I am his daughter. Because I am a reminder of her failure and her evil. Eleanor collapsed onto the sofa, not from fainting, but from rage. Her bloodshot eyes locked onto Ava. That trash of a father of yours deserved what he got. He was a nobody, an arrogant fool who thought he was better than us. And you're just the same. A gold-digging nobody, with delusions of grandeur. The screamed confession in the icy silence that followed was more eloquent than any proof. A murmur of horror rippled through the room. The mask of the great philanthropic lady had shattered. At that moment, the ballroom doors swung open. 4 agents from the Economic Crimes Unit, accompanied by several uniformed police officers, entered. One agent approached Ethan. "Ethan Montgomery, you are under arrest for the alleged crimes of embezzlement, money laundering, bribery, and document fraud." Another approached Eleanor, who seemed to have aged 20 years in an instant. "Eleanor Montgomery, you are under arrest for the alleged crimes of fraud, perversion of justice, and bribery in connection with events that occurred 30 years ago, and with the foundation you preside over." The handcuffs gleamed under the luxurious chandeliers. Ethan screamed and kicked as they led him away. Eleanor was led away in a deathly silence, her head bowed, but her eyes full of eternal hatred fixed on Ava. After they were gone, the silence was absolute. Everyone was looking at Ava. She took a deep breath and walked to the microphone on the small podium. The orchestra had stopped playing. "My apologies for the interruption to your evening," she said, her voice no longer cold but firm. "The Eleanor Montgomery Foundation obviously no longer exists, but the projects, the children it supposedly helped, still do. I have spoken with the authorities. The seized funds will be directed to those causes overseen by an independent board. And as for the rest—" She paused, looking for Sophia, who nodded with pride. "The lawyers for the victims of Montgomery Holdings' illegal practices are already organizing. Justice, though delayed, has arrived." She stepped down from the podium and began to walk toward the exit. People parted for her, some in fear, others with a strange new admiration. As she passed the grand fireplace, she saw the envelope. The same white envelope stained with sauce that Ethan had thrown in her face. Someone, perhaps a mocking servant, had left it on the mantelpiece like a macabre trophy. Ava took it, then walked back to the podium. The crowd, which had begun to talk in excited murmurs, fell silent again. "And now the gift my husband scorned." She pulled a folded paper from the envelope. It wasn't the documents she had kept. These were the originals. She unfolded it before the screen, which now showed a blank image. With the remote, she activated the document camera Paul had installed. On the giant screen, a crisp drawing appeared, a modern, light-filled building with hanging gardens and a revolutionary water management design. In the bottom corner, the signature, Ava Solar, Senior Thesis Project 2012. "This is the project I graduated with honors for," Ava said. And for the first time, her voice showed emotion pride. Ethan saw it once. He said it was a naive little girl's pipe dream, that it would never be built. He laughed at me. And this envelope, the one he threw in my face, contained the executive blueprints for that pipe dream. Because for all these years of being his failed decoration, I kept working. In secret. I perfected it. And last week, Columbia University's School of Architecture awarded me the prize for sustainable innovation for this design. A reputable developer has already bought the rights to build it. It won't be just another brick in the wall. It will be a home for real families, my first project. She folded the blueprint carefully. This was my gift to him, my dream. And he threw it in the trash, like he threw everything else away. She put the blueprint in her clutch. She looked at the audience, at those stunned faces, some complicit, others ashamed. "Dinner, ladies and gentlemen, is over." And she stepped down from the podium, walking toward the grand door, not looking back. No one tried to stop her. No one said a word. Only the sound of her heels on the marble, firm and clear, marking the rhythm of her new life, which was beginning at that very moment in the empty foyer of the house that was never her home.